Hey guys, welcome to another video. Thanks for tuning into this one. I do not know if I'm going to release this video. So if I release this video, then I think that means I did a good job explaining what I'm about to explain to you. And the reason why I'm doing this is because I want you guys to understand some of the work, I guess, behind the scenes that go down when it comes to making some of these videos. And in as much as I've been in the aviation industry for 14 plus years now, I do not know everything, all right? And I do not come to you as the person that knows everything. But the thing I've gathered in 14 years, I'm sure if you're an aspiring pilot, even a current pilot, I'm sure these things will help you. Now, let's talk about some of the things here, all right? What you have here is more like, think about this as the subjects that are involved in an interview, or the two people that are present currently are the interviewee, which is going to be you, you're going for your interview, and the interviewer, which is the person interviewing you against a set of criteria, which is going to be this here. Okay. Now, one thing to understand is that you don't have a lot of things written in this section, is because the point here is what you usually have is what you're measured against. So in this case, what are the necessary criteria that needs to be met? For example, British Airways needs 100 people. Well, there's a certain number of people that can advance to the next stage that you guys would have to go through, which will be the final BA assessment. So the point here is, if you have 500 people, they probably cannot take 500 people going into that next stage. That's just a number that I made up. Just hopefully that makes sense. So the point here is there's always a set of standards that you're measured against. And sometimes the standards will go beyond just your performance. It can be a set of standards that applies to everybody. In this case, how many people can apply or can move to the next stage. If there's a limit, then no matter how much or how well you've performed, if the other people that you are measured against have performed really well, you may be the last person to be dropped off and not get to move to the next stage. So I hope that makes sense. So the point here is kind of disregard this, all right? This area is just what you're measured against, or think about your observed behaviors on that day. Again, just think about the criteria that you're measured against. This, we do not know exactly what you're measured against, all right? We have an idea. We know what they're looking for, and that's what you would have to prepare for, which I'm going to talk about in this section. Let's talk about the interviewer, all right? This is the person that is going to be interviewing you that you know nothing about and you don't know who the person is. And this is why it's very important for you to know that as you go in for your interview, the person, every person that you meet on that day, think about them. If this person will be the person interviewing you on that day, how would you want to treat them? Because if that person you slam the door against while you're walking into that building or into that airplane or into that bus ride or whatever, right, is the person that'll be interviewing you, then you know that you're screwed, right? So the point here is you have to make sure that you have to be a good person. That's the point about it. Okay. Let's not beat that around the bush, but let's talk about some of the things that you that have been observed, all right, while you're going through your interview, okay, or while you're doing this interview, whether it's virtual or whether it's in person. The first thing we want to talk about is your first impression, right? The first impression really comes down to your CV. I think I've talked about this in the past, that generally speaking, they usually look at your CV before you show up. They look at your past performances. Sometimes they don't, but your CV is something that they usually look at. And sometimes they will have your CV in front of them. Your CV leaves a first impression on them about you. And that is why I always encourage you guys to work on your CV. Just because you used the CV for one airline last year and it worked for that airline doesn't mean it's going to work for this next airline. I mean, at this stage, if you guys are going through the Speedbird program and you've made it to this stage, well, I'm guessing your CV is somewhat decent. Okay, let's just keep it that way. But trust me, there's some people that also made it to the final last year and their CV were questionable. But let's not get into that. The next thing I want you to keep in mind is what we call, oh, by the way, this next thing in line with first impression is really when they see you, okay? So for example, how you dressed, how do you look? Do you look professional? Do you look like someone that wants to be a pilot? Do you actually look like someone that is interested in the job? In as much as you're under pressure and you may be tense and all that, you still need to have a very good first impression. So this is something that you can't really change, but I hope that you guys you're able to be in your best character, behavior on that day, okay? So the point here is leave a good impression on that day, all right? The next thing I'm going to talk about here is the halo effect. What does the halo effect mean? Really, This is something that you need to think about as well when you meet somebody that you really like. That person can't do anything wrong. That person can't say anything wrong. And this happens occasionally during interviews. And every interviewer, if they're being honest with themselves and being honest with you, okay, they experience this every now and then. Because some people just impress you by what they've achieved, what they say, what they do, how they carry themselves, how they speak. All of these things are traits that you can work on if you choose to build on it and work on those things. But you also have to have the right person interviewing you. That means the person that is actually carried away or astonished by your performance. So think about it as something, again, these are things that you don't necessarily have any control over, but you want to try your best to put your best behavior out there, okay? And hopefully capture this person's attention and have this horror, okay, around yourself. Bias, all right, halo effect, bias, they kind of sometimes go together, but think about bias as things that people generally have, right? We all have biases, and a bias can sometimes be something good or bad depending on the interviewee. For example, some people like some people, or a race, or a certain color, or a religion over the other one. No matter what you want to believe, the truth is that we all have biases. We are trained, and I say we, human beings have been accustomed we've been preached at to not have negative biases and give everybody an equal opportunity. But the truth is, every interviewer, if they're being honest with themselves, do experience a certain level of bias. So the question to you, the interviewee, is how do you handle that? And these are things that you have no control over, but you have to understand that these are things that exist, okay? I'm not going to talk too much about that. The next thing is empathy and rapport. Some interviewers, all right, they exercise more empathy. They see how much you've done, how much you've gone through, how you feel, how you're feeling that day, the stresses you're going through, and they help you out to make you feel comfortable, while some others won't do that. And you have to be prepared for these two groups of people that are either good or bad. If you think about it that way. Same thing with building rapport. Some would engage with you in conversations that make you feel comfortable and help you to relax and share the things that you want to talk about and help you to be in your best form on that day. While some others can be a little bit standoffish, right? And you don't want to have those kind of people. So if you've gone through interviews, if you've done a couple of interviews in the past, I'm sure you've seen some of these things. But again, these are things that you have no control over, but you have to keep in mind, and you have to be able to walk around, because depending on the person that is sitting across the table on that day may affect the way you perform. But that is what you need to work against. I'm going to come to that shortly. Then, of course, the listening skills of this person. Some people don't really listen well. Just because they're interviewing doesn't mean that they're hearing everything you're saying. But something I've also shared in my videos in the past is know that especially this is an in-person interview, they may not necessarily be listening to every word you're saying, but they're listening for the key things that you say and how you say them. And that will lead me to you, all right, the interviewee. What are the things you are doing currently to prepare for your interview, which is where we have the prep and knowledge. If you are very knowledgeable about the airline and you're knowledgeable about the pilot competencies and you have very good experiences that you can share on that day, I'm sure you perform pretty well. And it will show in your answers and how you answer the questions you've been asked by this person. All right. The next thing is the confidence that you carry. How do you carry yourself? How confident are you in what you say? That goes a long way. If you're going to be a pilot, you have to have some level of confidence. The truth is not a lot of pilots are confident. I mean, yeah, we all have our quirks and we have things that we are not confident in. That is true. But how have you worked on those things? Think about the question of weaknesses. I think we've talked about this in the past. Like if you're asked a question about your weaknesses, how would you want to answer that question? Would you share something that you are currently weak at or weak on? Or would you work on, or would you share something that you were weak on in the past and then you've actively worked on and it's now become a strength of yours? The next thing is your communication skill. All right. How are you able to communicate the things you know? How are you able to share this information with people? How are you able to deliver your information in such a way that the person listening can be actively engaged through the conversation, right? And remember, this is an interview, so you have a time limit. If you drag on too much, you will lose them and they will cut you short and they would not be impressed by you. If you're too short on the information you deliver, then it's going to be a problem. So finding a balance between the long and the short is what you need to work on. And that's something that you would need to be able to adjust to. Think about an interview like a dance. You're having a dance with this person, all right? And you have to go with the tempo of the person here. If the person seems to be short on time, you have to keep your answers short as well. If the person seems to have a lot of time based on the way they're addressing you and talking to you, then you have to go at that tempo as well. And this is where your ability to judge and read the room, your situational awareness goes a long way. Okay. Last but not least is the competencies. All right. Remember, I've talked about pilot competencies in the past, but the thing here is it's not about knowing those competencies. It's more about how you're able to apply those competencies and really dig down to the information they're looking for. And I think I've shared some things with you in the past, and I'm sure most of you have heard about STAR, all right? The situation, the task, the actions, and the results that you got, okay? The results you achieved. If you want to add another R to that, you can add review, all right? The review and the result. Now, the reason why this is important when you tell your stories is it helps you to stay organized and helps you to stay in line with the objective of the question. So tell me about the time you failed at something. You have to think about the situation in which you failed at something, the task you were given that you're trying to achieve in which you didn't get to achieve because you failed at it, the actions you took to correct the situation, and the results you were able to achieve, all right? And maybe what you learned from it, and that's what the review comes in. Because what you learn from it is something that you take into a next situation, next environment that you find yourself, whether you were a doctor, you were a lawyer, you were a barrister, you were, I don't know, whatever you were doing in the past. If you learn from those experiences, you can bring it to your aviation job as well. And remember, at the end of the day, this person is looking for what? Remember, they're looking for a certain criteria. And those criteria will generally include what we call transferable skills. And if you're able to show that you've learned from your previous experiences and you're able to apply them to your future endeavor, then you've learned something and you have transferable skills that applies to the job of flying. Just wanted to share this with you real quickly. I hope you found value in this one. If you have, please don't forget to drop a like on the video, and I'd love to see you in the next one.